Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. The plan over the next sort of hour is to walk you through some insights as to what we're seeing in the marketplace today, and give you guys a bit of an opportunity at the end to raise any questions and see if we can address some of those towards the end. If you have any questions during the course of this, please pop it into the chat feature. Some of the team will just check on those and then raise those at the end when it's appropriate. So the goal of today for me is, obviously we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to go through some of the adversaries and some of the threat trends we're seeing. In particular, we're going to start talking about some of the emerging threats. And at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that I have and some of the things that we're seeing to help you understand how CrowdStrike can help you address some of those concerns. So before we go into a bit more detail, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Patrick McGass. I'm a regional director here at CrowdStrike, responsible for EMEA. My sole responsibility is to work with clients that are going through probably some of the most challenging times within their organization. They've seen, an indicator of compromise, they've seen a potential breach, and they need help. My organization sits with two functional roles. One is, incident response and professional services consultancy. And the second part is where we help organizations deliver that capability 24/7 through a team of people as well, which I'll touch on a little bit later. Derek will introduce himself a little bit later on in a bit more detail, but Derek is going to be leading our strategic intel briefing here today to give you guys an insight strategically as to what we're seeing from a threat perspective, with some color around some of the threat actors that we're tracking at various different points of time. Go into this, I think it's really important. I think the majority of customers in the marketplace today know CrowdStrike pretty famously from the fact that we're a very strong endpoint provider. A lot of people don't actually know that when we started CrowdStrike nearly 10 years ago, George Kurtz, our CEO and founder, had spent a period of his time. He actually founded Foundstone. It's quite a mouthful, but actually for the first couple of years of CrowdStrike, we didn't have a product. We didn't have Falcon Host, which is the agent that was become so synonymous with endpoint and next generation AV. We actually spent the first couple of years working out in the marketplace, delivering incident response activities. And the reason we did that was to help obviously support our design and development of the endpoint platform, but also gave us a real understanding of the types of tools, tactics, and procedures threat actors were using in the open market, so that we could really understand how we can help organizations in the event of a breach. Since then, obviously, we've had a huge amount of growth. We've had some famous stuff that we've been particularly involved with, whether that's, breaches in 2016 dealing with, US presidential elections, through to some of the largest breaches you would have seen in Europe. Our name is tied to them, and we've been fairly heavily involved. We've also pretty in the marketplace. I've been lucky enough to actually meet with the Mercedes-AMG Petronas team down in Brackley. A huge amount of our effort of our business goes into making sure we have a hugely happy customers. For those parents out there, I don't know about you, but I was reasonably excited, or my children were reasonably excited about the fact that we protect the Pokemon Company International. So, it's quite a broad spectrum. We've got a huge raft and ream of customers that really give us an opportunity to share insights to what we're seeing today. So before I go on, I'm going to hand off to Derek. Derek's just going to walk us through, for the first part of today, some of the adversaries and threat trends.
Hi everyone, my name is Derek Buchanan. I'm one of the strategic threat intel experts that are currently here at CrowdStrike. I've been in threat intel for at least 14 years now, and I've worked across public and private sectors, and been engaged in a lot of SOC and incident response engagements in financial sector. And I've also happened to been lucky enough to be engaged in developing a threat intel program across a number of companies, and including my last role where I set up their infrastructure and became a lead for threat intel. So what we're going to talk about today, just across the board from my perspective, is to learn more about the adversary and learn more about what makes it important to you and why. So at CrowdStrike, what we do here is we believe that you should know your attacker and behind that is there is a human element to it. First and foremost, you have to understand why they want to attack you, and what they're actually after, and how they're likely to attack you, and also proactively, how can you defend against it, and how can you predict their next move? You don't have a human problem, you had an adversary problem, and that's where we need to understand that. So this is a look at the adversary by numbers. This is a look at the categories and the areas. So we track 147 adversaries. We've recently renamed 2, so we're consistently evolving. And they're Riddle and Sprite. And as you can see from the adversary numbers here, government and financial services, they make up the majority of the actual makeup in terms of numbers. However, that's still emerging in the sense that e-crime threat actors are becoming more evolved, more aware, more sophisticated. And just an example there on the one on the left, you can see Wizard Spider, and Wizard Spider is one of the people who was a creator of TrickBot, all via spam mail, and Crowdstrike, and also Riku ransomware, as we all full and well know. So I'm just going to move across to the statistics here and tell you a bit more about that. And as you can see, across 2019, there's a 57% split, where you can see e-crime being something somewhat significant there. And you can see 15% here is nation state, which is something which they're attributed. And the unattributed is something that we monitor. This is where we look for that space where there's a continual involvement of attacks that we're still looking to remediate and try and ascertain who are those likely threat actors and where do they actually fit. As we move across into 2020, in current period of time, we start to see that the intrusions that are in comparison to 2019 have completely evolved, and e-crime has saturated a lot of this aspect. And the thing is, when you think about nation state has almost disappeared, and why is that? Why is it that that's the case? Well, what has happened is e-crime has actually outsprinted nation state and made up the majority of their percentage. And in doing so, that they've done is it's become big game hunting. And the big game hunters, they've gone after the large corporations, and ransomware as a service has evolved and become a more attractive prospect, and have been adopted by a lot of the wide threat actors across the e-crime sphere. And that's what's actually taken the lion's share of that. And so the nation state has stepped back, and they've kind of splintered off, and that's where it's all going. So what is exactly going on, and as a long trend, and why is it that we're seeing this? Well, I'm providing you a different view here, and you can see that e-crime, as I said before, has exploded across the board. And it's observing these new e-crime actors and the techniques and the tools that they're deploying across, and they're utilizing nation state actor tools to its maximum effect. And as you go on, I mean, year on year, we've seen the likes of manufacturing gone up, financials gone up, healthcare has gone up, and by 0.9, financial gone up 1.9, and then you've seen technology, which is year on year going up, and attacks have merged on that particular vertical, but it dropped this year slightly by 2%. So, healthcare, manufacturing, food and beverage industries, they all saw intrusion spikes. And that's due to the changing systems, the pandemic, supply changes, and adversaries have seen this as an easy target and ways in which to try to get companies, organizations to pay ransoms. And so, as you can see, from the first half of the year, we saw, within that time, we saw healthcare at around 75% intrusions against the threat actors. And these very same actors were saying that they weren't going to target healthcare, or stepping back, and it doesn't seem to be letting up. And as there is a continued involvement, and as we're looking for a cure for COVID, you can expect these actual intrusions to continue, and e-crime to actually take advantage because they're opportunists. Across the board, we're also seeing a lot of living off the land techniques, and these techniques are here to devolve and here to try and skate under the radar. They're native. These are system-based tools that threat actors are evolving, and they're rapidly becoming popular. And as explained, this is something that's continually evolving. So let's have a look at some of the most active tools that we're starting to see across the board, shall we? And in the first piece, what we're seeing is These are native legitimate tools that you'd find on your own host systems, that you would find across Windows and Mac OS systems. And threat actors and the virtues are taking advantage to skate under the radar so that they can't be seen. And so these are things that they're leveraging. These are things that we're observing this hands-on keyboard activity, and we'll be able to push that out and to our customers and show them what's actually happening. In the world of penetration testing, they're using the likes of Mimikatz and Crowdstrike. Mimikatz is a tool that looks for dumping passwords from memory, and so it looks for hashes and Kerberos tickets across the board. This is a continual intrusion techniques that they are using, which is very much out there. You can get them as commodity, and they are available. And these threat actors are using them as a method of a way to try and skate. And once they get actual on the systems, but when we look at the ransomware, we see that Dharma is one of the ones which are really piping up, and so is Phobos as well. And you've got to think Dharma and Phobos are two types of ransomware as a service, and they're really nefarious. And what from we've seen and why they're so prevalent is the fact that threat actors are actually sharing clusters of these across the board. And so they're sharing them across trusted networks. And so it makes it very difficult in that sense to try and see if they can try and detect it. But we are able to see this activity, and we see that coupled with the additional activity that they're carrying out, which is RDP activity, especially where Dharma is concerned. And this has not let up, not since coronavirus has continued to be a pandemic across the board. And it's targeting companies and victims worldwide. And the access to RDP is currently always being sold on underground forums and marketplaces, and this is completely prevalent. It's not letting up at all. So as I said before, with Crowdstrike, I think it's really important that you know your threat actors, and here are just a few. And we use threat actors, and we have, if you're not familiar with them, we have a number of them, 147 as I said before, and we use the first name and last name specialty. So the last name indicates the actor type, and the first name indicates the type of activity that they're engaging. So we have bears, which are Russians, we have pandas, which is China, chilemas, North Korea, spiders are e-crime, jackals are hacktivists, and kittens are Iran. And in the case of mentioning a spider, what we've seen across the board is the shift from spiders. They are what would normally target financial organizations. They are no longer doing that for PCI data and point of sales services. They're actually doing data extortion. So they're actually going out and they're actually holding the company's organizations to ransom and demanding. So I'll mention a little bit more about one particular one, and you can have a look. So you can look at Pinchy Spider, for example. Very financially motivated actor, very much one of the ones that were instrumental in the gang grab between January 2018 and May 2019. Definitely a continued actor, and also a development of the REvil ransomware, which started in around the April of 2019. And so in all that, what you've seen is that there are a number of partnerships that are happening, especially with ransomware as a service, and especially as for example, REvil has attained millions of pounds just in payouts for the last year. This particular threat actor targets worldwide, doesn't discriminate. Like I said, very financially motivated, and very, very technical in terms of the way they go out to excavate REvil and use it against their victims. If victims don't pay, what they're doing is they're actually going out and stating that they will release the data. In some instances, what they've done is they've auctioned it for non-compliant victims, or they've engaged in other activities such as DDoS, which will force the victim into releasing them funds earlier. These are very much big game hunters, actors, and they will actually go and try and head out straight for, once they've actually got persistence, they will try and get to the active domain controller or the active directory, where they're then able to get a foothold in the organization. A lot of the spiders are considered to come from the Eastern European companies, organizations, so Eastern organizations across Europe. So it's one of the things in areas to consider, that if you're a company that historically was targeted by financial organizations, it may be something that you want to look at in terms of spiders and see how they're affecting you. And this group is very much very much, as I said, active in the terms of trying to get Metasploit, Cobalt, and Coldit, and they will actually use a number of variety of malware variants just in your own environment. So here I'll just show you the big game hunters. As I said before, you've got Pincher Spider and Reval ransomware and how they move laterally across the network. And then you've got, for example, Wizard Spider, one of the people who are instrumental in the Riku ransomware and the deployment. So these are the main big game hunters who go after large organizations and conduct ransomware attacks for large sums. These are the ones that you would really need to keep an eye for, and the different types of techniques that they'll employ. So let's have a little look at the emerging threat. So as I said before, we've seen an increase in ransomware as a service. It's prevalent, it's usage, it's freely available, and there are a number of data exfiltration options available. But why is that? What's making it so prevalent? Well, the threat actors, they can sell their code. They can pick their code up on underground forums. They can distribute it across the board, and they share it, and it makes it in somewhat very difficult sometimes for someone who wants to tweak code to then try to find it. We're very good at doing that. Highlighting the insider concerns that they'll leverage insider individuals in organizations to see if they can actually deploy that on their behalf, and they will contact them. So that's another threat that needs to be considered. And so when you think about those various ends, you think, well, what next and what can we do? Well, as I said before, with Crowdstrike, we're very good at knowing who your adversary is, who is it that's trying to target you and why, and what is so valuable within your organization that wants to target you. So, you look at your threat actor profiling. We'll give you your threat actors, the malware, what type of malware is actually looking at your environment, how does it behave, the agnostics of it, the breakdown and biology. And then we look at the fidelity and the indicators, and you need to get a high fidelity of indicators relevant to your organization and relevant to your actual industry, because those are the things that will actually protect you and make you more resilient against these type of threat actors and give you that step ahead to be more proactive. So as I speak about data exploitation and extortion, and I remember I mentioned it before, and you will be, the likely is that threat actors will try, once they actually get a foothold in your organization, try to do that. But this is the methodology that they'll go and they'll try to take. They'll conduct the reconnaissance of your environment, and then once they locate the domain controller, they'll then try to move laterally across the environment to look for network shares, network drives. They'll then try to implant ransomware, and based on at that point, once they then ransomware has been run, they will then encrypt the drive. They'll encrypt all of the relevant data and extort the actual organization and put the data on the dark web or the under forums for sale. Naturally, this, if seen by external parties, it's damaging. It can be untold, but they can also just destroy it. They can actually just simply go out of their way to completely not want to actually put up there for sale. They will just destroy it and say they'll destroy it anyway. And so those are the things that you need to consider, and the consequences can be untold. Threat actors, they don't have any kind of real morality apart from they want the financial gain, and the financial is there, but they also do follow through on what they're saying they will do, and it's not something to be missed. And then, as you've seen with different legislation being brought in the US and different areas where industries are basically saying that if you try to engage with these threat actors, then it becomes a problem. There's difficult issues there to be had, and we stop breaches, and we go out of our way to prevent this type of activity. So let's have a look at the main actors that do this. The main actors are, you've got prevalent ones here, but we'll talk quickly about Twisted Spider and Viking Spider, because these two are very much a tied, tested relationship that they share and the way in which they act. So Twisted Spider, he's very much an Eastern European financial gain actor who prevalent in the Maze ransomware and escalated himself to target multiple industries And one of the things that they're very do with all their opportunities, they engage in very much spam campaigns and they look for RDP credentials. And so this particular threat actor is continually targeting a lot of companies. For example, it's an engineering company, a marketing company, and recently is developing the Ragnarok data ransomware. So it's something that to be prevalent about with these particular actors. And what they particularly do, they work together in tandem. And so because they work together in tandem, you'll find that one particular individual will host a DLS, which is their data leak site, and the other person will more than likely produce and get the data from the company. Viking Spider is very much the same, but a smaller range, very much more along the lines of a criminal actor in development. He's a development of the Ragnarok ransomware and has been deploying it since 2019. They're definitely, without doubt, engaged in big game hunting activities. So the tactics and pushes is one of the things that are prevalent with this particular threat actor. In terms of exploitation, he'll look for the domain controller level, and then he'll try and go from there. These threat actors will go on the data leak sites and they will look to try and post your company information on there to state that you actually have had a breach, and they will leave it there as long as they can to see if you actually pay. And in sometimes they have the titles of Hall of Shame or Shame of War, and these groups will see just a psychological aspect to find out if the organization will pay. They don't like individuals that will get third parties involved, and so one of the things that they're concerned about is that the interference of not paying or being told not to pay. So I'm going to quickly look at another bit of activity, which is activity at the farm. And one of the things that we've looked at and detected is that the agricultural industry is starting to see a little bit of a spike. With the fact that we're seeing heightened tensions across the road with trade tensions in terms of food security and concerns and the pandemic, this is a clear opportunity for threat actors to get involved in this. And as technology becomes more and more invested in horticulture aspects, it becomes a worrying time for that particular area. And so there are a number of options in which we can do. Again, as I said, threat actor profiling is one of the things that we should be looking for, and leveraging the indicators that are found against that particular industry to look to see if there are any particular patterns of that activity with your own network, and monitoring for those particular types of movement that these threat actors will actually go about trying to achieve their action on objective. So what I'll do now is I'll hand back to my colleague, Patrick, and he can go along and talk to you more about Crowdstrike services as an overview.
Thanks, Derek. As you just hand over, I think it's really interesting to sort of pick up on some of the things that you were saying. And you know, one of the aspects that I always get involved with the client is until they've actually seen a threat hit their organization, often, you know, we're talking to clients about details of threat actors, it almost doesn't become real world. You know, some of the threat actors that you mentioned, whether that be Twisted Spider, Graceful Spider, I'm also dealing with a number of refined kitten aspects at the moment, which is an Iranian threat group. You know, we see these on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, when I'm talking for the next few minutes about what I see, it really is about the kind of threats that I'm talking around the last 3 to 6 months. And we have actually seen a huge spike in the sort of e-crime aspects of what we do. But the nation states are still out there, and you know, a lot of the reporting that we put out there, you know, the Cyber Frontlines report's a great example of where, you know, you can get the latest trends. This is released on a 6-monthly basis, so you know, feel free to, as the clients on the call today, have a look, get some insight as to what we do. So when I talk to clients, you know, there is a huge amount of combination of understanding what we do from a threat actor perspective, but it's also, as to Derek's point, trying to understand, you know, what's the motivation and what's their driving force when they're hitting you as a business. One of the scary things Derek mentioned, you know, the way in which the threat actors work together is hugely concerning when we talk about, you know, particular threats. You know, great example, dealing with a client at the moment. You know, they saw one of the threat groups, one of the spider groups hit their organization, and we would typically not see their MO as being targeting this type of industry client. Within about 48 hours of us being brought into the organization, we could very, very clearly see that actually the organization has moved from gaining initial access and compromise and then handed it off to a secondary group. What really then took hold was that when we looked at what they were trying to achieve, they were literally looking at exfiltrating the data first before holding them to ransom. So often or not, you know, clients feel that the ransom is the primary issue. You know, they think about, you know, where, you know, the ransomware notification that you hear. I'm sure a lot of you on the call today would have seen that kind of ransomware hit your organization, or seen, you know, examples of that in the open market. The challenge is that actually, and often or not now, we're seeing that the data leave the business well in advance of the ransomware taking hold, and it really leaves you with a big impact. So now not only are we seeing threat groups target their specific industry sectors, you know, we talked a few earlier on that looking at point of sale terminals, for example. Now we're seeing them branch out into wider areas. I wouldn't want to surmise specific reasons why, but, you know, it may be that they have more bandwidth, more time, or more focus that allows them to broaden their modus of operandum. Equally, Derek talked a little bit about ransomware as a service. You know, there are threat groups out there that have super experience and skill at gaining access into an organization, but haven't really made the steps into brokering what they do with their access. So they simply want to resell their access onto third parties that are equipped to be able to handle, you know, the core ransomware, the core negotiation. You know, when it comes to often or not, you know, we get involved in, you know, customers that are dealing with multiple threat actors, multiple areas, that then have a real true cost. And that true cost, you know, often isn't advertised. You know, when you talk about some of the threat groups, you know, as an organization, you definitely don't want people to know whether you've paid ransom or not. But to give you to give everyone on the call some sort of idea of types of ransomware that we see, you know, here's some real examples of the type of costs that we see organizations having to foot as a bill. You know, the type of issues that we face there is that, you know, organizations may or may not have cyber insurance, may not have been, you know, fully covered to protect against this level of loss. And ultimately, you know, when you're paying out, you know, anywhere above $1 million, that's hugely impactful for any organization. Whether you're a, you know, small organization or a large multinational, these costs have to come from somewhere. And while we're going through such a turbulent time at the moment, it's almost like the profiteering has got to exponential volumes. So what do we do as an organization? You know, our core focus to work with clients is about helping them, you know, answer the three fundamental questions that organizations should be challenging themselves in the face of these type of adversaries. One, you know, am I breached? You know, it's as simple as saying, I have a breach today, I need help. It's very, very common for us to come into what would be, we deem an emergency situation 2, 3, 4, 5 days later, after an organization has tried to understand the impact of their organization before bringing in a third party. Often, you know, companies don't really answer the question, am I ready? You know, they've worked through the traditional way of pen testing. They've not evolved their strategies for preparedness. They've not looked to address whether it be red team, blue team, purple teaming, whatever color of the week it may be, but they've not really looked to truly understand the tools, tactics, and procedures and test those in their environment. And then the sort of crown jewels of any security organization or program is to really understand your maturity level. Understand where the potential impact is, understand the playbooks, the processes, the sort of competencies, the tools, the technologies, the people, and how you shape that together to ensure you can protect your organization. So at Crowdstrike, we focus, you know, a portfolio between those areas, whether that be incident response or proactive services. Some great examples on the screen of some of the bits that we do. But for today, I'm just going to focus a little bit more about what we do in the world of incident response. So when we're talking to clients, you know, I literally spent this morning at 8 a.m. this morning talking to a client. You know, when we're talking to customers, there's two real schools of thought. Some clients are hugely concerned with just bringing their operations back online. over the last few months, I've worked with manufacturing organizations that, just having the material downtime of a day cost them north of $100,000 in production cost. There are other clients that handle, very sensitive, PII data, sensitive client information, as well as core IP, whether that's in the aviation sector through to the defense sector. And they're concerned about making sure that IP theft hasn't taken place and exfiltration of information. So CrowdStrike's goal is about really working towards sort of 4 key steps. Those key steps are, look, we need to assess and gain visibility really, really quickly. So we leverage our technology to do that. That gives us some great insights as to what's happening with hands-on activity. I'll touch on the sort of the tools and the component parts of what we do a little bit later on. We obviously want to make sure we contain, right? Ransomware, when you see that first indicator, you see that first, I'll be honest, could be just the first ransom note. You want to make sure that you can limit the damage across the environment and quickly shore up protection immediately. We then want to dig into the investigation. We want to start looking at now what's happening now, but we also want to look at what happened previously. Root cause is a key driving force in a threat, to understand how the threat actor gained access into your organization. Where were the potential indicators of compromise that were missed? Where could you catch them again in the future? It is as simple as helping to understand the timeline of events, but aiding you as an organization to be able to plug those gaps. And plugging those gaps is super important. And then moving forward, it's about making sure that you put the forward-leaning hunting into your environment to make sure that you can protect moving forward. And these key fundamental stages is where CrowdStrike really, really focus. So when I talk about where we build out for what we do, I talked about visibility. The tools that we leverage is a combination of our endpoint product as well as our Falcon Forensic product that allows us to gain a snapshot of systems really, really quickly instead of having to work through full disk images. If anyone's done full disk image analysis in one system alone, could take a number of days to just get it to me, let alone actually conduct the analysis. So when we're talking in the realm of a threat, we need to be able to move extremely fast to be able to help an organization. We're a team of people. We've got hundreds of consultants around the world globally. We've got a team of Intel experts like Derek and a wider team of 100+ analysts monitoring what's going on in the dark forums and understanding what the threat actors are doing. And then we're really focused at how we hunt and remediate in your environment. So if anyone knows our branding, Falcon Overwatch is a 24/7 team of threat hunters that are monitoring clients' environments through the course of an engagement to make sure that if there's any hands-on activity from a threat actor, we can catch it really, really quickly. And then remediation is key. Again, I'm going to touch on remediation a little bit later on, because a lot of people through the course of an incident are very, very guided by the emotion. And the situation when their businesses are potentially at risk, you will have different camps in your business that are focusing at different areas, and you need to be able to understand how you address the concerns of the business by being able to be moving forward. So with CrowdStrike services, we are different from the traditional approach. I've been in the industry for over 10 years. I've worked for traditional antivirus vendors. I've worked for service consultancies. Feel free to check out my background on LinkedIn. The traditional approach is I've seen something happen. I now need to be able to move really, really quickly. And the old way of doing things was sending technology, sending black box appliances for you to deploy. It was about taking single system snapshots. I'm sure a number of you have been on the call and you've had a team of people from one of the consultancies come in and they send 10 people to site, and they're starting to try and do the things rapidly, but it ultimately takes weeks and months. And the challenge with weeks and months, especially when we're talking around some of the velocity of the adversaries that were talked about a few minutes ago by Derek, some of these adversaries can be in your organization for months, but equally they can be in there within minutes and start hitting your organization with disruptive techniques, as well as potential impact techniques like ransomware. So we CrowdStrike focus our business really on, how can we move rapidly, be fast and effective in being able to protect your organization, and then how do we move you through to remediation? So almost instantaneously, the first step for us, as I said, is visibility. And the goal from visibility for us is deploying Falcon Host. That's part of our engagement. It's no additional cost of what we do, but it's a case of being able to understand real-time telemetry of what's happening on those systems. That typically for a client, depending on their deployment capabilities, whether that's leveraging SCCM or one of the other deployment software package tools that are used out there, that typically happens in the first few hours of us being invoked as a partner when dealing with an incident. Instantaneously, once the agents are deployed, we turn on Falcon Overwatch. So not only do we have consultants pulling back data snapshots of those systems to understand the root cause and understand the potential impact, we've also got a team of 24/7 threat hunters in your environment as a safe pair of eyes over your environment while we go through the investigation process, which is hugely critical. But when you're talking about the kind of threat actors that we have, you need to have a combination of these particular technologies and capabilities, especially when we're dealing with the varying different complexities of incidents that happen. And when we're talking about how we move through into recovery, a lot of the time, we forget about recovery when we're thinking about incident. We think about how do we stop it from happening, in my organization. But actually, most boards will want to spend time with the business to understand what the impact was, but how fast can we get back up and running? And one of the things that we've been able to do, leveraging our technology through Falcon Host, is because of a particular feature in it called RTR, or real-time remote response, we're able to remote access into the systems that have had Falcon deployed. And we're then being able to actively recover those systems very, very quickly. We're able to, remove or kill off any persistence mechanisms. We're able to scrape down and remove any executables or binaries that have been left by the threat actor. And we can then start to recover your business without having to re-image and rebuild. I think we've all heard the war stories of, big organizations having to, re-image hundreds or thousands of laptops, desktops, and servers, and it being a 12 to 18-month project at a huge amount of cost to an organization. Our goal is about doing that really, really quickly so that we can recover you as fast as possible. We've got a huge amount of examples, use cases and examples. I'd implore you to reach out to Bytes to set up a one-on-one session with us as a business, where we can share with you some great examples of where we've been able to help mitigate the ongoing and recurring costs that happen from an incident. Some great examples on the screen. We've worked with organizations, where they were infected by Emotet and TrickBot, and we've been able to complete remediation of systems within 72 hours. Often organizations running an incident response activity in the traditional sense of deploying technology and then looking at the single system run, they'll be lucky to get their first single system analysis up and running within that 72 hours. And the key for us is about leveraging that platform that we have as an organization to be able to address and give us that visibility and protection as we go through protecting an organization. Just a great example, we typically track and break down the adversaries into complete detail. Again, reach out to Bytes, happily set up some sessions individually with you as customers to walk through what we do, how we do it, and how we can create that visibility for you as an organization. So that's about me. I've deliberately tried to talk as quick as we can so that we leave sort of 10, 15 minutes to answer some questions. Thanks for listening. I do always like to leave this slide up. Should you have an incident, we do have our emergency 24-hour breach hotline. Raise a ticket on our website, whether you're a customer or not. We endeavor to support our clients and our prospect clients as quickly as possible. So with that said, I kind of want to open up the floor to the team. Really, is there any questions? Anything that Derek and I can address today? Feel free to either put them in the chat box or we can cover those off.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, if there are any questions, please feel free to put those into the chat box. We'll see if any of those come in. We've got one here, which is, what are the key fundamental, if I can speak, what are the key fundamentals that customers need to address? quite an open-ended question.
Great question, and look, I think, you know, I sit there in a real privileged but unprivileged position that, you know, most organizations will see 1 or 2 major incidents per year, maybe more. Okay, I'm dealing with that on a daily basis because of the site that I get. Number of things that I always talk to organization about is being able to have, you know, eloquent and effective detection and response mechanisms. You know, relying on single platform is not really the ideal world. But then I've seen organizations go really to the other end of the spectrum where they're delivering really extensive SIEM type platforms that, again, you know, give them a lot more volume of activities to address. But actually, the key is detect, investigate, and respond as quickly as you can. You know, Crowdstrike talk about our 1-10-60 ideology. It's, I want to detect everything within 1 minute, I want to investigate within 10 minutes, and I want to be able to start remediating within 60 minutes. And, you know, the goal there is to make sure that if the advanced adversary is hitting your organization, you have the speed in which you can go through. Again, you know, we work with organizations to help look at that, but detection and response, often or not, it's the alert, the incident, the IOC that's been missed, or the coverage wasn't there for them to be able to see that before the material impact hits their organization. Again, whoever wants to address that, feel free to reach out to Bytes. Happily have a more targeted conversation to anyone that raised that question.
Perfect, thank you very much. I think we've got any others. What's this one here? Is there any specific trends that you are seeing currently or over the last 3 months?
I mean, that's an interesting one. I mean, some of the reports and some of the stuff we touched on today, big game hunting, something that we're seeing a lot more prevalent in the space. I'll be honest, healthcare has seen a bit of a spike. What I would say is that we've not just seen a healthcare from the traditional, you know, NHS or, you know, traditional sort of drug companies. Again, you know, they're obviously struggling at the moment with, you know, trying to deliver a resolution for us all globally with the face of COVID-19. Actually, we've been significantly involved in activities where it's been, you know, organizations that support the elements of what treatment would be, whether that be, you know, manufacturers of, you know, dialysis machines or technologies that are supporting, you know, the health provision, right through to organizations that handle logistics for businesses that are transporting chemicals that may or may not be involved in the production and support of COVID antibody tests, right? So, you know, we've had a huge spectrum of that sort of healthcare window that's been hit. The other side is education has been a gateway to a lot of breaches. You know, education has always been one of those areas that, you know, has been super difficult to protect because of the fluidity of the sort of international communities that go in and out for study. But now that we're seeing, you know, individuals, you're seeing Johnny at home working alongside his father that's, you know, part of a big organization, it can be really, really difficult and challenging to sort of address that gateway, and organizations are struggling with that protection. So yeah, again, I would see a kind of spike in that sort of element of the type of activity over the last sort of 3 to 6 months.
Perfect, thank you very much. Yeah, got another one here. Could you briefly explain the differences between your Overwatch and Complete offering, especially in smaller organizations that don't have dedicated security teams and 24/7 cover, etc.? Very good question.
Yeah, great. So Overwatch, think of them as just a team of people, separate from my services team, separate from the Falcon Complete team. Those Overwatch people are, they have a tool set that can sit across all of the client's environments, where they're looking for certain behaviors and outputs across all of our client endpoint systems. And they're looking for behaviors or patterns for them to understand whether there's potential hands-on activities, IP ranges that are coming in that may be emerging threats. And what they do is they would then notify the specific clients that have consumed Overwatch as a subscription. They would notify them based upon if there was any impacted systems within their environment. So if client A had Falcon host deployed with Overwatch, the Falcon Overwatch team would be continuously 24/7 hunting across their environment to understand if there's any hands-on threat from a threat actor. At the point then an incident or something has been identified, that then gets handed back to the client. And in your particular world, I think the question mark was, in a varying degree of size of organization that may not have a dedicated SOC team. The challenge but opportunity is that, as Overwatch, you would get an alert, you would need to investigate and then understand the business context to how to then protect your organization and fix it, frankly. When we talk about Falcon Complete, if you are a Falcon Complete customer, which enables you to have a 24/7 managed remediation service on the endpoint, what we do is Overwatch would hand off that ticket or the inferred ticket straight into the Falcon Complete team. And that Falcon Complete team would then do the investigation. They would understand whether there's any further attribution details. They would look at the TTPs of the potential threat actor, understand what processes they may be trying to embed on, a domain controller, a server, a client device. They would then go and inspect the systems across the business, understand if there has been any IOCs across your organization, and then most importantly, they would use that recovery process that I talked about in the terms of incident response, which is a feature within the product called RTR. They would then remote access into that system, all under audit, and they would then clean, scrape, and recover that system while it was still online. They would bring that system back to a pre-infected state, and that, again, I don't know whether the business and the businesses on this call are aware of it, that actually is covered by a breach warranty backed by AIG that says that if it's under management, if we were to miss something, then you would be covered up to about $1 million. So really what we're doing there is we're monitoring and actively hunting, and then we're using the Falcon Complete team to actually remediate the system. So in essence, with the organizations I deal with, and it is a varying degree of size, there are limited resources. Doesn't matter how big your business or small your business is, resource is at a premium, and it's super difficult to build out a 24/7 SOC when you need a minimum of 5 people just to cover the time, as well as the holidays, sickness, and everything else. So you don't want to be woken up at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning. You want to be able to do this in a business time suiting, but also you want to make sure that you've got the protection and coverage, and that's what Falcon Complete can do from a remediation perspective. Any other questions, Mark?
Perfect. Last one, I think, is a fitting one to end on. What's the #1 recommendation when someone has an issue?
I mean, this is, so I am part of Crowdstrike, and I do care that people leverage our technology, and it is super important, and it's really easy for me to go down that technology route and say, you have to have the best detection. Do you know what? The #1 issue that I always face with a client is, and the first 2 questions I always ask a customer when they're ringing us, whether they're a retainer customer or whether they're reaching out to the breach hotlines that you can see, is, have you advised your legal counsel? Have you advised a third-party counsel? Do you have cyber insurance? The real important here is that, if you don't involve your organization, when I'm talking to security teams, they'll often try and deal with it in isolation. If you don't involve your organization, we can't help you, or you can't help yourselves address the potential impacts. A breach isn't just about stealing information. It's about what's been stolen, how that impacts your business, but also, more importantly, how it impacts your clients. So bringing early into the engagement cycle, even if it's just for visibility, bring in early the legal counsels within your organization. Especially if you deal in international operations, we deal a lot with clients that have US operations. Being the most litigious country in the world, you have to be really careful about privilege and the information you're managing. And then when we're talking around things like cyber insurance, often or not, cyber insurance is seen as now as the protection. If you've ever gone and bought any kind of insurance, we all know there's an excess and a premium to doing that. And cyber insurance providers do absolutely give you access to providers. We're pretty much on every single panel of the insurance community globally. But that doesn't mean you're going to get a relationship. So I would implore any client to understand that there will be a moment that the capability from forensics perspective and protection of your organization, there will be a moment when you need third-party support. And I always talk to organizations about having the right legal, the right insurance, but also having a retainer with a business to make sure that when you are in the state of an emergency, you don't have to go through all the arduous legal reviews, statement of works, documentation, and you can go and act as quickly as you possibly can to mitigate the impact to your business as fast as you can. Hope that answered the question, Mark.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Give it another moment or so. I don't think we've had any other questions come in whilst we've been answering those ones. If there are any.
I always know it can be challenging putting it out there. So look, as I said, all the way through this, Bytes and Crowdstrike in partnership want to make sure that you're supported. If you'd wanted to set up a more targeted 30-minute session, feel free to reach out to your Bytes account team or your account managers, and we'll set up a session to have a more bespoke and targeted conversation with you and your organization.